Well, moving on to Oh Darling.
Yeah. So, Oh Darling. So Maxwell Silverhammer kind of harkens back to music hall, one of Paul's favorite genres. Oh Darling is a tribute to doo-wop. It's got the sound of these beautiful harmonies, very reminiscent of a group like the Platters. And then, of course, the Fats Domino, triplet piano, and Little Richard. And if you ever write Oh Darling, by the way, the O exclamation point, darling, very important because it's a tribute to Little Richard's song, Ooh, exclamation point, my soul. So Paul's delivering this great vocal. Behind him, they're singing like the Platters. Every now and then, Paul lets out a Little Richard yelp. And I happen to think it's a great song.
It is indeed, and it's a wonderful vocal by Paul. He spent a lot of time working on it day after day to really get the guttural quality he wanted it to have. So it was a proper throwback. I was speaking just last year to Chris Thomas, who at this point is, 20, 21. He works for George Martin at AIR, which is Associated Independent Recording. That's George's independent firm. And Chris was there and working with Paul as he came in day after day to get that vocal just right. And Paul said, you know, I'm so much older now. I can't quite get that vocal right. And of course, Chris is thinking, you're 26, 27, come on. Are you kidding?
I mean, people forget, when Abbey Road comes and the Beatles break up soon thereafter, George Harrison's 26 years old, right? And Ringo, who's the oldest, is 28, 29 at this point? I mean, they were not even in their 30s yet. They'd had this whole career as the Beatles. It's kind of mind-boggling. Then they wrote music which is going to last forever. So
we could be understanding, though, if they felt old, it's because being a Beatle by that point probably meant you had a lot of road miles on you, as one might say. Well, turning to Octopus's Garden.
So Octopus's Garden is all because of Ringo's sour stomach. He was on a boat trip with his good buddy Peter Sellers after he quit the White Album for a week or so, and the chef brings out a plate of octopus. The story is Ringo says, "I'm not touching that," and so the chef or the captain tells him about how smart octopuses are and how they form gardens to attract the opposite sex. Ringo says, "Nice idea for a song," writes this song, very reminiscent, of course, of Yellow Submarine, but this one is a Ringo creation. And there's some great video of George Harrison helping him out with the song. Everyone kind of gives it a whirl. And again, if you listen to the song, the guitar playing of Harrison is just great on that song.
Well, that intro alone is slick. And that's a slick piece of work to be able to come and to put that together.
Absolutely, right. So even though it was a quote-unquote Ringo song, they were all, well, maybe not John so much, but definitely Paul and George gave it a lot of attention.
They had a blast making it, and as you just noted, Scott, they spent a lot of extra time on it, and we'll hear that when we really dig deep in a little bit with the medley. The amount of time, especially McCartney, Harrison, and Starr to a certain extent spend on that is really inordinate, and helps create something very magical. Well, as we said, I Want You, She's So Heavy, with that haiku set of lyrics that you so movingly stated earlier, was the first song they worked on, and the last song.
That's right. I Want You has this very long gestation period. They do 32 takes at Trident. They decide that they didn't get all the way through, so they end up taking take 9, take 20, and take 32 parts. The beginning's 9, the middle's 20, the end's 32. They bring it to Abbey Road. They make a new tape, and they call it Take 1. They add on some vocals. Then they go back to the Trident tape. They add on a Moog synthesizer with white noise. Then they go back to it was this incredible production for the song with 9 words in it. But one of the longest songs that they wrote. And the very last thing that they do for Abbey Road is some work on I Want You. So it did start the album and end the album.
And they were layering guitars on the end, Harrison and Lennon, and they gave it, my term, not theirs, that kind of Wagnerian feel that it has. It's dark, that wonderful coda.
It's heavy.
It is heavy. While talking with Alan Parsons for my new book, we discussed this song, and he made a big point of noting that it was he and not Jeff Emmerich who made that cut at the end.
You know the story about the ending of the song? So the John Lennon's sitting there, the tape's running, and it's repeating over and over again. And he says, "Jeff, I'm going to tell you when." And according to Jeff Emmerich's book, he says, "Okay, cut." But the truth is, I believe Alan Parsons' story, because Alan was the tape operator.
He was, and
And
Alan,
that's the one who cuts the tape.
he was the guy who did that, and they were sitting up in the control room in Studio 2, which originally was a single room where George Martin and Norman Smith or whomever could look down through the window and see everybody down on the studio floor working. Well, to accommodate the TG12345, it's just fun to say that. To accommodate the TG12345 Mach 1, they had to change the configuration of the control room, and they added more space. They put in a couch, but it meant that they had to turn the mixing desk so that it was perpendicular to the window as opposed to parallel. So now you're working the desk, you're looking out the window, but that's where Jeff and George were. Behind was where Alan sat, and I said, what do you remember seeing when you were in the Abbey Road studios all those years ago? And he said, the back of Jeff and George's heads. That's what he saw, except when, of course, John Lennon came up there and, as you said, yelled cut, and finished side 1 with an absolute flourish.
Intermission. Welcome back for side 2.
Does anybody remember playing that on your record player back in the day? I would. You probably did this too. I would put it on repeat. What did you move the stylus, and it would just play over and over again. And I would play it, about 10 o'clock at night. And every time that sound came, or the cessation of sound, it would jerk me awake, right? Because suddenly it's gone. And then the record would start over. I would fall asleep. It'd play all the way through to I Want You, She's So Heavy, and I'd be jerked awake again. It was really...
I think the first time I played it, I thought something was wrong with the record.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
it
Well,
just looked like,
all of us.
And then the second side, where Her Majesty cuts off, I was sure something was wrong with the record. So.